I'm happiest in the saddle.
A fellow sportsman.
I am an FBI agent!
Great Scott!
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole!
Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm George McGee.
And this time, dear Ramblers, it may have taken us just a minute, but George and I are reviewing the blockbuster, the original blockbuster. It's been 50 years. It's by Steven Spielberg. It made a lot of us not want to go in the water. It is...
It's only Ruddy Jaws, Charlie.
I can't believe it's taken us this long to cover this film on the podcast. We always knew we were going to cover it. I would say I can't believe it's been out for 50 years, but that's just because it makes me feel old. But this was an old movie to us when we first discovered it. It was on TV all the time, I felt. It was on TV a lot growing up, at least I remember it being. So where are we going to go to in this episode? What should people expect, George?
Well, it's going to be the usual retro ramble treatment. We're going to talk about, obviously, this film. As some may know, this film wasn't the easiest film to make. You know, whilst it became a box office phenomenon, created the term blockbuster, the summer of Jaws, etc. It was very much a disastrous behind-the-scenes affair. So we'll go into the areas where it went wrong, where it came from. Obviously, we'll talk about first memories, and I suppose we can talk a little bit about its legacy, things like that. So yeah, we'll try and do the usual thing. If you haven't listened to Retro Ramble before, we'll try and give you a little bit of insight into this film, how it was made, why it still holds up, has it been remade, spun off, have there been any terrible sequels, etc. So yeah, it's a light-hearted look back at the films that Charlie and I grew up with, and I think it's safe to say Jaws is a film that everyone of our generation grew up with.
Absolutely. Okay. I would imagine that I know for a fact that we have a number of trailers to choose from because it has been 50 years. It's been on TV. I think you even gave me one of the most recent 7.1 Blu-rays of it. So that was enjoyable to watch, by the way. Great sound. Or did I buy that?
I've got my own Blu-ray copy. So
it must have been a dream. I think I did buy it. Yeah. But if you've got that good to go, I'll get the projector ready.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill. A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws. Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Jaws. See it before you go swimming.
Can I just say some of the worst advice I've ever got from a trailer? Make sure you watch it before you go swimming.
Classic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack just about that trailer. No, okay, so, George, how did we get this film?
Right. Well, let's start with the producers. So it's produced by Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown, who were both at Universal Pictures at the time. And they'd both independently heard about Peter Benchley's novel Jaws. And this is pre-publication. I think one of the producers' wives was in publishing or in press and got an advance copy. So they both got their hands on it, like, separately, and read it over a weekend, and they both agreed, this is amazing. This is the most exciting thing I've ever read. We should do a film. So they purchased the film rights before the book's publication in 1973. And David Brown, one of the producers, admitted in a retrospective, he said, if we'd read the book twice, we wouldn't have made it because it was so unfeasible from a production point of view, the amount it's set in the ocean. This is early on in Steven Spielberg's career. Obviously, this is, the film that kind of made him. So he'd done a couple of films at this point. He'd done Jewel, which was a TV movie that I think might have got a later release in cinemas, but yeah, it was a TV movie that a lot of people saw and got a lot of notice of a guy being pursued by a relentless, massive truck. And he had done his first feature theatrical film called Sugarland Express, which I am right in thinking neither of us have seen.
No, I have seen Jewel though.
Yes, I think we've both seen Jewel, but yeah, Sugarland Express was his first theatrical film, and he made that with Zanuck and Brown, but he wasn't the first choice. They met with the director, and Peter Benchley, the book's author, was quite annoyed because he kept this director who wasn't named in the documentary, kept referring to the shark as a white whale, so he didn't do himself any favors there. Spielberg actively went for it. He had got a copy of the book as well. And I think the book became a bestseller in its own right. It was like one of those, a bit like a latter day Dan Brown or 50 Shades. I think it was a book that everyone was reading. It was a bit of a pulpy novel. It wasn't sort of highbrow, but it was a great thriller that a page turner. But there's a lot in the book that doesn't make it to screen. And the producers and Spielberg were keen to get that a lot of the more sort of tenuous plot points stripped down. So there's a whole subplot about Chief Brody's wife having an affair with Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss's character. So that's cut out. And there's also a different motivation that given to the mayor. So obviously the reason that the mayor wants to keep the beaches open in the film is just to keep people in business. In the book, there's a whole subplot about the mayor being owned by the mafia, that the mob have a lot of investment in Amity Island, and that's why they want to keep the beaches open. So that's cut out as well. Peter Benchley himself, the first few script revisions, and then Spielberg brought on a playwright called Howard Sackler, who's uncredited, but he effectively broke the back of the story, according to Spielberg. And then another writer called Carl Gottlieb, who is a writer and actor. He actually turns up in the film as the mayor's assistant. He's like a bit of a pudgy guy with a tash. He did most of the work getting into shape, and he spent a lot of time, obviously, a bit like Shane Black on Predator. He was on set to, like, as an actor, but also to help punch up dialogue and work with the actors. Yeah, he came from an improv background, so he did a lot of work and a lot of rewrites. And some of the best lines in the film are admittedly improvised. Apparently, like, you're going to need a bigger boat was a bit of a running joke on set, and then Roy Scheider decided to throw it in one day. Let's get into the technical challenges of this film. Obviously, they wanted its key character is a giant shark, and they built this mechanical shark.
Please tell me it had a name.
Yes. So Spielberg referred to it as Bruce, named after his lawyer, affectionately. So they built this huge mechanical shark. They've actually built 3 of them. So one was like for each side of, like, left side, right side, and then the other side would be like cogs and access points. So they had to have one for each side, and then I think a head-on one or a hole. Each shark cost approximately $250,000, and
that was in 1975.
This is 1975. So a good chunk of the budget, the starting budget, we'll get into budget later on, but the starting budget for this film was $4 million. So yeah, that's pretty much almost a quarter of the budget is on the shark alone. They tested it in water before they arrived at set in Martha's Vineyard, and it worked perfectly. However, those tests were done in a non-saltwater tank. Once they placed it in actual ocean water, the shark started playing up.
Started eating the crew members.
Well, you say that there's apparently a legend that Spielberg was in the production when they were testing the shark, and he was showing it off to his mates, and he was showing it off to George Lucas and John Milius. And they said to I don't know if it was like late at night or something, but Spielberg goaded George Lucas. He's like, "Oh, go on, put your head in the shark's mouth." And so Lucas did, and John Milius and Spielberg pressed a button, and the shark's jaws closed on George Lucas, and they couldn't work out to get them open again. So George Lucas was apparently stuck in the shark's mouth, and I think both Spielberg and Milius admit saying maybe that was sort of an omen that things weren't going to go right.
It was the one thing they didn't want to do to George Lucas.
Yes. So, but obviously George Lucas survived. In terms of location, I think the film is set on the East Coast. I think Amity Island is a fictional place, but so they picked Martha's Vineyard, which I think is like Boston way, I want to say. Or
yeah, I mean, I got the feeling that this was an amalgamation of all of the Hamptons and New York State area, Cape Cod, all of that mixed together. Yeah.
Yeah, so they filmed on location in Martha's Vineyard, and apparently the reason that they picked Martha's Vineyard is that it has a very shallow bay that they could install the shark rig on the bottom of the bay and move it along the sandbank.
Okay.
Because Spielberg was adamant that he wanted to film on the open water, and obviously that was the film's downfall, because most films, when they film in water, whether it's a World War II battleship movie,
or even King Kong, for example.
Yeah,
present day King Kong type thing that was done with.
Yeah, it'll be done in a tank in a studio, and they did that. Another ill-fated movie, The Abyss. They converted, I think it was like an old factory into a water tank, but that went wrong for different reasons. But yeah, Spielberg was adamant that if they shot it in a tank, it would look fake, because you've always got the backdrop of the sky, like Truman Show.
Yeah.
And it would take the audience out of it. And he was repeatedly warned, don't film on the open sea because it will just be so problematic. And Spielberg came out and said, looking back, he's like, I didn't see the insanity of it. I saw the authenticity of it. Making Jaws really became a fool's mission until the audience proved otherwise. Because there was tides, they would set up a shot, and they had a barge boat with the generators that would start drifting away, and then the camera barge would drift in another direction, and then the orca itself, the ship, would move around, and so before they knew it, they would be completely out of shot position. It would take another hour to set that up. Yeah. So sometimes they would be setting up stuff for 5 hours, and they might have shot for 1 hour of the whole day. Yeah. Sometimes they would finally get the shot all set up, and then a tourist boat would turn up in the background across the horizon. And there was even a point, because the Orca boat, Quint's boat that they built, wasn't actually properly seaworthy, because they'd made it look, bigger and more impressive than it was. It was being dragged out to sea, and the boat towing it was pulling it too hard, so they flooded the Orca and sank one of the boats unintentionally. So it was pretty much anything that could go wrong. Obviously, there was sinking ships, bad weather. The shark just didn't work, would refuse to work in the water. And that's as a result that, whilst I think some of the shots in the film were were from the shark's point of view, I think there was a lot of shark stuff they had to just cut out and say, right, let's just do the Hitchcock thing that Spielberg referred to, like in Psycho. It's not what you see; it's the image you make up in your head. It's all down to the editing.
And that's very much what it became like. And it's interesting that he. You say Hitchcock kind of established it, but that we've talked about this in Aliens, and we've talked about this in many other films since, that not showing the full beast until the end. You see that on the other side when there's a hero, or there's a hero with special weapons and stuff. It's you don't get to see the full thing until the very end. So I think that's some very good filmmaking, some very big lessons. The learning is in the struggle, in that he probably made his biggest eureka moments you learned the most on this film?
Well, yeah, that's it. Because of all the issues, so the shoot was originally scheduled to be a 55-day shoot. It ballooned to 159, and the production budget more than doubled. So it was originally budgeted at 4 million, and it came in at 9 million. And it got to the point where the name the crew were using was Flaws rather than Jaws whilst they're shooting. And Spielberg was, adamant. He just was convinced that his career was over. And he's like, I heard rumors that I would never work again because no one had ever taken a film more than 100 days over schedule.
And he broke that record. Okay. So that's how we got this film. I guess it's probably worthwhile talking about how it did at the cinema. Obviously, we know this is the...
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, I say the book was a huge bestseller. So there was a lot of anticipation to see the film. And I think once they did the test screenings, Universal knew that they had something on their hands. And yeah, that's, a lot of credit goes to Steven Spielberg, but it should also go to the editor on this. And I think, is it Velma? Werner Fields. So yeah, a huge credit should really go to Werner Fields, because I think that's it. Going back to the genius of Jaws, it's how well it's edited together. And there's so much tension built up out of nothing. I think, some of the scenes where Brody's on the beach, and it's just cutting between people in the water, and it just slowly building. I think the editing in this film is fantastic.
What we have to talk about that zoom in effect. That's Brody on beach. Obviously, yeah, Spielberg, but what is that?
I think that's the was it the dolly effect? What's the
Yeah, so it's where the camera's moving away but zooming in, or the opposite. It's one of those. So I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's a dolly zoom. So basically, you're shooting the camera forward on tracks, but at the same time you're zooming out. So
yeah, that's it.
You've got this disorientating thing that the background looks like it's slamming to forward. You're keeping the lead character or a point in it that stays in focus, but everything else behind it jumps. And again, I think that was it's also referred to as a Hitchcock shot, because I think it was used a lot in Vertigo. That was like one of the sort of key effects they used in that.
So basically what I said, but the other way around.
Yeah, pretty much. I realized we haven't got into first memories, but we can get into that after the release. So it was originally supposed to come out in Christmas 1974, but due to obviously the overruns and everything, it was pushed back to summer 1975. Yeah, I think Universal realized through the test screens they had a hit on their hands, so they decided to release it at 450 screens, which at the time was an exceptionally wide release for a major studio picture. Because I think what they did prior to this was that they would release a film in a state, and then it would slowly roll out across the country, that they wouldn't just release it everywhere at once like you get today. It would tour around, and that's why films would stay on the screen for later and things like that. But yeah, Universal decided to release it on more screens across the country. They did extensive marketing. Again, we covered this in the other sort of king of the blockbusters that revolutionized blockbusters, Batman, in terms of the marketing campaign, merchandise, lunchboxes, T-shirts. That poster was on everything and heavily emphasized television spots. Back in the 70s, the summer was usually a graveyard slot for films, because everyone was on the holidays. Nobody wanted to go to the cinema. Everyone was outdoors. But because the film was so good, everyone and it built up so much hype and word of mouth, and people were queuing around the block to see it, it became the highest grossing film of all time up to that point. And it was also the first film to gross over 100 million at the box office until the release of Star Wars 2 years later.
Yeah, but then he'd established the blockbuster.
Yeah. But yeah, let's go to first memories, because I think it's one of these films that I don't remember all I can remember is that I saw this film far too young. I think I was about 5 years old. It's in the same sort of bracket that I probably saw Ghostbusters. I think I was around 5 years old. As you say, it was always on the TV. It was probably on at a party or something, and some of the kids are watching it. And I was traumatized for years.
Yeah, and I think very similar as you. And I was explaining that to when I was talking about this with my wife. I was saying, she was saying, yeah, her and her sisters, they all watched it on the. They were standing behind the couch, and she said she remembers watching this through a cushion. Like she's like, the music, the tension, and she's like, you don't see the shark. But she said it was so, but I said I was putting the point, for me, it's an action film. It's a thrilling action film. It's not horror for me.
Yeah, because it's not that gratuitous, really.
No, and I think...
I mean, amazingly, it was a PG. I think they've reclassified it now as a 12.
but that's for me, that's what I love about, and I think what everybody loves about Spielberg's work, and I think that's when he's at his best, or you could say was at his best. I know he's in not making the same type of films today, but he can do thrilling suspense, action, moving, and we were talking about Jurassic Park in the same breath, talking about he captured that it's how everybody in the scene reacts, and the audience sees that first, and then that lifts the audience up to a level that when the audience actually sees what the actors are reacting to, they're at a heightened level of expectation. So I'm not the first, you could wax lyrical about Spielberg all day, but for me, I watched it in bits. And I was terrified by it, so scared that I never watched the whole film. And then I went back, and I think when I was a really brave, like 15-year-old, I want to say, or 14-year-old, like, because we had the video knocking about by that stage, because it was, it's legend. It's like everybody, like, I'd be surprised if everybody sees Jaws, even in France, when you say Jaws, they know the film you're talking about, even though they call it something else, a full sentence.
Is it like the teeth of the sea or something?
Le dent de la mer, yeah. So even though they couldn't just call it something else, or just Jaws, learn a word. Even here, everybody's seen it. So, but I finally got around to watching it so what I mean is like all the way to the end. And I think it was on TV. I think I would say a video, but I feel like it was like one of those late night Channel 4, Channel 5, whatever it was, that I was like, I'm an old guy now. I'm a big guy. I'm like 14, 15.
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.
I'm not afraid anymore. I'm on my sofa in the northeast of England. I can take
cuddling my chubby Labrador.
Exactly. So I finally got around to watching it, and obviously it's a great film, but like it's a very satisfying film. Like at the end, I forgot how much. So just to bring this all together is that I always avoided watching this film beyond a certain point. Yeah. And then I found out that I'd missed out on the best part of the film, which is the last section that you don't get to because you watch the bit of the start, and was that a boob? And then there's the kid with the lilo, and I don't think I ever made it past that.
No, because that's it. It's terrifying as you're seeing as a kid getting, a kid on a lilo. It's like, I could be that child.
I am a kid on a lilo. Oh my God. So yeah, but I mean, this film, it's like, I don't think anybody ever looks at the water the same.
No,
it goes through everybody's head. I wonder if I feel like the people who are totally chill miles out in the sea and like, there's nothing here. It's like, you obviously haven't watched Jaws.
Even now, I am still a bit nervous about swimming in open water, like diving off a boat with nothing else around. I don't hang around for too long. It does make me feel, if I can see land in sight, then I feel a bit better, but it still makes me a little bit nervous.
Oh no, but now as you get older, you know about everything else. There's jellyfish and there's loads of other stuff. So traumatized, I think is the word you're looking for. But my wife, with the joke, she was like, do you think this was made by rescue people who were sick of like fishing people out of the water, and they were looking for a way to put people on? I was like, maybe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think obviously this film, it's worth saying, gave sharks a bad rap because, yes, I think obviously there are incidents of shark attacks, and I'm sure many Australians will will have some terrifying stats. I think there's a lot of sharks that shark attacks are fairly rare, and they're not like aggressive. They definitely don't hold vendettas. Following this film, whilst it terrified a lot of people of going into the water, it also pushed the amount of shark fishing and shark killings unnecessarily, probably quite a bit.
Yeah. But no, great action movie. Let's talk about the performance. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, no, but that's the interesting thing. You're referring to it as an action film, and obviously it's a blockbuster, and people were queuing up for the spectacle and the thrills. But the thing I realized, like looking back, is it's a great character piece. There's a lot of, yes, you've got, if you cut down the actual shark attacks and the action scenes, you've maybe got half the film, if that. I mean, obviously, yeah, it is very much a film of two halves, of the setup, the attacks, and then you're just on the orca with three people, and it's almost like a play.
Yeah.
But there is so much built up in terms of there's so much clever, and again, it's that, as you say, that stuff that Spielberg would establish throughout his career in terms of family dynamics, the fact that you've got people talking over each other. It just feels so natural. You've got of him on the phone, but then the wife's chatting to the kid in the background.
Yeah.
And it just feels so natural.
Feels real. And I think that's what I took away from it this time, is that it's, it terrified me. This was the blockbuster. Then I went back, watched the whole thing. Was like, I get this film now. This is a great film. I enjoy it. To watching it now, and I thought the same thing as you. I was like, when is Richard Dreyfuss going to turn up? And then when
Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah, and then when he does, I was like, is this guy obnoxious, or is actually is he the best thing in this film? Or then it just becomes like, as you say, like a play between these.
Release Robert Shaw.
These so diverse characters. It's like, yeah, we've kind of like, because they show him, and then we forget about him.
Yeah. And he's just crazy fishman dude.
Yeah, the crazy cat lady of Amity when it comes to fishing. And so there's all this stuff going on, and there's the mayor thing. And now that you told me about the gangsters, they do go for that look, the whole mayor's outfit. And I love the way the jackets he wears, and the fact the way he turns up with the cigarette in his hand every time. It's his thing. I don't know if you noticed that, but he has the cigarette cupped in his fist, like that, ready to go. The multi-layered facets of the Schneider character, and then you get Dreyfuss, who comes up with a bottle, and they get drunk and they go out, and he's got all of his equipment. I totally forgot about that scene.
Yeah, which has, for me, still the biggest scare of the head in the boat.
Yeah,
Ben Gardner's head, that still gets me every time. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's like really, really scary. But I feel like that we're seeing Spielberg's like the character development, the layeredness. Like you're seeing, he doesn't like to go in the water. It's like brilliant. It's like, hero. Yeah. He only has one. He only has one weakness. So we have that, and we have. But then they all come together, and I mean, come on, Robert Shaw, who we only know from Russia with Love. I'm sure he made many other films, but in this film, it's just like he's off on his own. He's just like, you can't kill Chachi.
I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. And you gotta make up your minds. You wanna stay alive and ante up? You wanna play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter. I don't want no volunteers. I don't want no mates. There's too many captains on this island. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
It's a brilliant performance.
He's the Simpsons character all over, isn't it?
Well, that's it. I mean, that's it. There's countless references. This film has been lampooned so many times, but yeah, that's in it. I think it's Groundskeeper Willie is doing the fingernails on the chalkboard.
No, but I feel like the sea captain in The Simpsons is Robert Shaw. Like,
oh yeah,
it's all nonsense. It's all about fish.
Well, apparently he's based on a guy that's in the film. So the guy that plays Ben Gardner, and I think he's one of Robert Shaw's mates. He's seen as one of the crazy fishermen in the film, and he has a little bit of dialogue, and it's complete nonsense. And he's got the guy that's got the like floppy eared cap following him around. It looks a bit like Elmer Fudd.
Yeah.
And he was a local. They cast a lot of local people, and he was a local guy called Craig Kinsbury. And yeah, as I say, you know, the writer Carl Gottlieb was getting a lot of inspiration from all the people he met, and was just taking so much from this one local crazy fisherman. He's like, I'm going to use that for Quint. I'm going to use that. And some of that opening thing of big fish, dig out, you know, that whole thing in the town meeting was based on like stuff that this guy was coming out with.
Stuff these guys say, yeah.
Yeah. But apparently Indianapolis speech was rewritten by Robert Shaw. He tailored that to his own thing from the script. He's like, no, this needs to be cut down. And yeah, unbelievably, it was cut down. I think it did run for a lot longer.
That is quite the delivery. Yeah.
It's an amazing performance. But apparently Robert Shaw, again, with everything else going on in the film, apparently Robert Shaw was a bit unpredictable. He was a bit of a nasty drunk, according to Richard Dreyfuss. And so him and Dreyfuss there was a lot of animosity between the two. I think they worked it out in the end, but he said, yeah, he was just like basically, Richard Dreyfuss was like, yeah, he was just a bad drunk and super competitive. So it worked for their characters at the same time.
For the dynamic, it added another layer, because you can tell they go through a little arc where there is this animosity, and then there's this like sort of shared respect. We both know the sea has no lie.
Yeah. I think it's also worth talking about, there's Bruce the shark, but there is actually some great real footage with sharks. And there's that great scene of putting Richard Dreyfuss, we're just going to put you in this cage in the sea. So that was done for real. So they, there was this well-known couple in Australia, Ron and Valerie Taylor, who had done these shark documentaries. So Spielberg got in touch with them and got them to film real second unit footage of real sharks.
Oh, mate.
And because real sharks in the average, like I think the biggest shark size, especially in Australia.
I want you to tell me they got a midget.
They did get a midget.
Oh, so, amazing.
Or a small person, I think is the correct term, small person. So, yeah, the average shark size is 17 foot long at biggest, but the mechanical shark, or the shark in Jaws, was supposed to be 26 foot long.
Yeah.
So Spielberg came up with the idea of, well, why don't we just make the cage smaller and put a small person inside? So yeah, they did that. They hired this very sort of brave little stunt man to get in the cage. I think in the original script, Hooper's supposed to get attacked in the cage and dies, but there was an issue went wrong when they were filming, that the shark got caught in the ropes that the tank was holding and just went mental and wrecked the tank, the cage completely. And so they had to because that footage was so impressive, they decided to rewrite the scene that the cage explodes and Hooper escapes and hides off in a rock dike down below. Because, yeah, they had this amazing footage of this shark just thrashing about, trashing the cage.
That's good. No midgets were harmed during the making of this blockbuster. I do love the way he went straight for the midget. Release small people. I think it's small people.
It's small people or small person.
Okay. Any other Jaws movie trivia? I'm guessing no real coulda, woulda, shouldas. Well, you said that Spielberg was that's an interesting one. That's really the main coulda, woulda, shoulda, is that he wasn't the first choice.
No, I would have thought that it was like fairly tied up, but there are some really interesting coulda, woulda, shouldas for the main three.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
So, for the uninitiated, coulda, woulda, shoulda is where George tells us who was considered for the role, and sometimes it's a director, but it's mostly actors who was considered but did not make the final cut. But we still want to know who they are. So, who are they, George?
So Spielberg, I think, was quite keen to have like some fairly. Didn't want it to be a big cast, though there were some big people considered for it. So. Apparently,
because the book was quite known by this point. There's probably a few people he could have got.
Well, apparently, Richard Dreyfuss originally, when he was approached originally, he turned it down. He said, "Yeah, it sounds like an interesting movie that I'll definitely want to watch because I've read the book, but I have like no intention of being it." And then he obviously changed his mind. But for Quint, original choice was 70s hard man Lee Marvin.
Okay.
He was in like I want to say the Dirty Dozen, and Lee Marvin was like, yeah,
that's the name. I mean, if we said that to our dad, he'd be like,
yeah, he's sort of like
you don't know Lee Marvin.
Yeah, he's sort of like your dad's version of Jason Statham. He was like a proper hard man, a bit like Charles Bronson, but I think Lee Marvin was a bit more of a better actor. But for Hooper, John Voight was, obviously the current advisor to President Trump for Hollywood policy, John Voight. But he was, considered. And Jeff Bridges was also, a very young Jeff Bridges was considered for Hooper, which I could see.
Sounds like he was going on beard quality.
And for the role of Brody, out of my cold, dead hands, Charlton Heston. And apparently Robert Duvall was actively campaigning for the role.
I could see Duvall.
Yeah, I can't remember Spielberg's reasoning. I don't know if he said he was like too young at the time. Mm-hmm. But bizarrely, Roy Scheider, I always get, and I think you made the same mistake. I've always thought it was Schneider, but it's Scheider. There's no N. Roy Scheider was at a party and he bumped into Steven Spielberg and he's like, "Oh, what are you up to?" And he started telling them about, "Oh, well, I'm working on this shark movie." Roy Scheider was like, "That sounds amazing. Is there a role for me in it? Can I play a role?" And Spielberg was like, "Oh, I remembered him," because at that point Roy Scheider was probably most famously Gene Hackman's partner in French Connection, in the first French Connection. So he was like, "Oh, maybe he could be," So yeah, it was a chance encounter, and obviously it worked out very well because he is brilliant in this. As a very much a flawed hero that would go off and it would obviously, as a monster movie, this film has been so influential. But I think just in terms of like the tropes of, the hero having, whether it's, having flaws and having weaknesses. This was the 70s, which were more sort of character led before we got into the more macho 80s.
God bless America. Yeah, this is very much an enjoyable character piece to go back to. It's a master at work. We don't need to talk about the sequels. I can't see George and I racing back to cover Jaws 2, even though it has Michael Caine in it.
No, Jaws 4, the Revenge has.
No, he's in another, or is it? No, in Jaws 4.
I think he's only in Jaws 4 because he's the love interest to, is it Lorraine Brody?
I don't know. No. Jaws 2 is the Jaws 2. I think was on more, and I found that easier to watch.
I remember Jaws because Jaws 2 is sillier. Yeah. I remember Jaws 2. He manages to bring down a helicopter.
The helicopter lands on the sea, and then he takes it out.
Yeah. Jaws. I think the only one I haven't seen. I've only seen snippets of is Jaws 3 or Jaws 3D.
Is that Jaws 3: The Quest for Peace?
I think it's got Dennis Quaid in, and it's Brody's son, and it's set in a
sea world,
in a sea parks, a fire at sea parks. But yeah, I think out of the sequels, I would be tempted to go back and do Jaws. I haven't seen the movie. I have seen the house it booked. Very nice. I would go back and watch Jaws 4 just because it's so bad. It's supposed to be one of the worst. It's up there with Batman and Robin in terms of worst sequels of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, anything else you want to say about Jaws, George, before we move on?
I think we've stated how influential this film is, how important this film is. Yes, the shark does look a bit rubbery. Oh, I forgot to share my, it's tied with first memories. I remember going to Universal Studios in California. Was it in California?
It was California.
And I want to say 4 at the time. And you go on the Jaws, you're going on the tour of Universal Studios and it stops by water and the shark came up right next to me. And I was, again, just, in tears, understandably.
I was also on the trailer. So it's like a weird thing. Like you're in this carriage thing and it goes
like a train type thing, isn't it?
But actually they trick you because it starts as a boat. And you think you're on a boat, and then it goes, and then the water goes down, and you're right next to the water, and then the shark literally jumps out, and it was right next to you. And George has never been the same since. But
scarred for life.
Yeah, but we were very fortunate to be taken there at such a young age, and you don't know how lucky you were to be traumatized.
But I don't. I'd be interested. I know that we did a screening of Jaws at my work. We've got like a little sort of cinema sort of set up at work at the office, and a bunch of the younger artists at work watched it. And I didn't get there. Like I'd be interested to know of someone watching it now for the first time to get their thoughts. So does it still play well? Does it still? And I think in the most part, I would hope that it's still, because of the things we talked about, the editing, the tension, the character development. I would hope that it still holds up to a first time watch. And
we also have to talk about John Williams,
the maestro. Yeah, obviously this was,
the other thing, the understated point about this film, it's like dun is the music that's been used, parodied, whatever, but that adds, for what we can't see, we can hear.
Well, I would argue it's probably the most iconic piece of film music, the most recognizable piece of film music
across the world. If you if you hear that, it's
within a few notes, you know what it is. We love John Williams. Steven Spielberg loves John Williams, and that's why he's worked with him on pretty much nearly every single film. He is an absolute legend. I think he has officially retired now in his 90s. I think the last Indiana Jones was his final film. But yes, it's a phenomenal score. Even in the sort of lighter moments, there's a lot of, again, like you see a lot of stuff that Spielberg would do in the rest of his career. You get that in John Williams' score. There's little motifs that he would sprinkle throughout his career.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Well, it's been great to go back to one of our oldest memories, a film that we've watched way before we were getting into all the other films that we cover here on Retro Ramble. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We can't tell you what's coming next, but it will be of the usual Retro Ramble quality. And as you know, listeners, whatever we cover, George and I take it as seriously as you would expect us to take it. So excellent. Thank you for following us, for liking and sharing us. Please review us on both Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us get the message out there. And if you want to stay up to date with all the latest content and jokes, you can find us on Patreon. That's just patreon.com/retro ramble. So for this episode, I've been Charlie McGee.
I have been George McGee. And
Jaws McGee?
Jaws McGee, and I won't be getting in the water anytime soon.
Wonderful. Okay, well, until next time, we will see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hang on, Lois, I'm watching a movie.
And now back to Jaws 5, Fire Island.
You think we should be this far out? Stop worrying, Mark. We'll be fine.
Hey, I'm gonna eat y'all. I'm gonna eat that hairy leg. I'm gonna eat that one too. Hope I can see right up them shorts. I got a whole bunch of rows of teeth to chew you with. Dinah, Dinah, Dinah. Oh, now, wait a minute. I did have a chubby kid on a raft earlier today. It's okay, though. I've been swimming a lot lately. Yummy,